Before I introduce our next guest, let me ask our listeners a question. What do you think is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in the USA these days? If you had to pick, let's say, between automobiles, mass transportation, buildings, or farms, what would you pick? Well, if you went for automobiles or mass transportation, you're not alone. Turns out a recent Green Building Awareness Survey, Autodesk sponsored with Harris Interactive, found that of the approximately 2,600 U.S. adults surveyed, only 4% knew the right answer. And the right answer is buildings. Our next guest is here to talk to us about just that and how Autodesk helps in designing greener buildings. And I'm not talking color at this point either. He's the Senior Vice President for Autodesk Architecture, Engineering, and Construction, Jay Bhatt. Jay, welcome into Tomorrow.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Is that a fair introduction of you? I mean, folks, I didn't realize only 4% think in terms of the correct answer being buildings.
You know, it is fair. It surprised me as well. 4% of American adults realize buildings are the biggest greenhouse gas emitter and problems around our environment. But, you know, in the building industry itself, that's a much higher percentage. In fact, a lot of people in the building industry realize that buildings generate 39% of all greenhouse gas emission, 40% of all energy is generated by is utilized by buildings, and 70% of all electricity. So buildings are a big problem, as far as our environment goes. But there is a lot of activity going on right now. There's a lot of people trying to do something about it. You've got cities like the city of Aspen that have put out 2030 challenges that are trying to improve their energy efficiency by 50% over the next 20 years. Or countries like India that expect their sustainable design and green building to increase from what is 6.7 million square feet today to 1 billion square feet in the next 10 years.
Wow.
So a lot of activity trying to solve this problem.
No doubt. And we tend to think in terms, I think, most of us as buildings, if they've got big, small, big, tall smokestacks coming out, well, there you go. There's a polluter. But how is it that buildings, other than, of course, you mentioned energy in general, can actually contribute to this problem?
Well, that's part of it, Dave, to be honest. When you drive down, if you're in a cold environment on the East Coast, and you drive down the highway, you see steam coming out of a building, that's a leak. That's not normal. That shouldn't be happening. That's part of the problem with buildings. And, over the next 20 years, 50% by 2030, 50% of the buildings that will work, live, and play in don't exist today. That's a lot of building activity in the U.S. So we have an opportunity to really affect this through better building, better design, better construction to avoid those leaks and the smokestacks, or the steam or the things coming out of buildings that create the problem.
And is that where Autodesk software can actually come into play here to say, let's remind us of all these things, maybe at the very least in a check-off kind of capacity to say, all right, now we're designing this part of the building, let's look at these issues, or here's a problem, let's address it?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. Yes, it is. In
That's
fact.
why I get the medium bucks.
That's exactly right. But seriously, absolutely, that's what we do. That's our mission in life, is to produce tools and technology for building professionals, architects, engineers, contractors, to try to assess the greenness of buildings or infrastructure that's built and make it better. So we create these 3D models, these very sophisticated information models that you can utilize to do simulation and analysis and check ventilation or daylighting or heat use, ultimately providing the right result in a digital world before you actually have to break physical ground. The best time to make the change is in the digital world, and that's what our software allows to do. Products like Ecotect and Green Building Studio and the like. Wow,
very cool. And again, you said that's the key, is before you break ground and then all of a sudden start making changes, well, wait a minute, we're ordering the wrong stuff, whatever that stuff is.
That's exactly right. Before you break ground, because once you're on that construction site, whether it's building a building or laying a road or putting a bridge on from an infrastructure standpoint, too late to make many changes. Very expensive, very problematic. And our President-elect Obama has a big infrastructure investment plan, $60 billion going into new infrastructure. That also can be affected by this green movement. Greener infrastructure, greener roads, greener highways, greener bridges, greener tunnels. Those are other areas to improve that sort of our environment.
Has it been your indication, Jay, that most architects and engineers are grasping this technology now and saying, I have to design with this? There's just no way around it, right?
Absolutely. It's the core technology is called building information modeling, and they are grasping it because there is pretty high awareness in the building and infrastructure industries around the problem. 48% of clients that hire an architect or an engineer to build a building, for instance, require you to use some sort of sustainable design practice. And a lot of times you can do that through our software.
So that must be the BIM we keep seeing all around Autodesk University.
That's right.
It's building
Building Information Modeling, BIM, and it's really a very important acronym for not just our software universe, but for the building industry generally.
Well, no doubt that your group with Autodesk is doing some pretty unique things and continuing to keep everybody up with the latest technologies to make sure our buildings are greener in every way.
That's right. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to innovate in the core software. We're trying to add applications either through acquisition or just organically developing software to make it even better. Make sure that everybody can use this software to generate more energy efficient, lower carbon emitting, and just better buildings for our environment.
Terrific. And the specific website for Jay's team and get a better picture of everything they're doing, autodesk.com/BIM. There those 3 letters.
There it goes. There it goes.
Thank you, Jay, for spending a few minutes with us, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dave. It was really great.